First, she made the floor wet and called me to come meet her. I innocently heeded her call but slipped and fell hard. In an act of feigned sympathy, she helped me up and offered me something to eat.
I'm sorry, dear. Here, have this.
I'd barely tasted the food she offered me when I realized it was peanut butter. I passed out immediately. Hi, I'm Caroline. My life has been like the ocean, never stable. I have had moments of peace, but then there have also been times where I have been burdened by storms and life-threatening billows. I was an only child. My parents were high school sweethearts who eventually got married after college. I was born 5 years after they were married. Actually, my mother suffered miscarriages twice before I was born. It wasn't easy for them, but eventually they had me. Well, my arrival was met with mixed feelings for my father because while he was blessed with a child at long last, he lost his wife, my mother. She passed while giving birth to me. My father loved me unconditionally all the same and passed on the love he had for Mom to me. He was still young, and more than a few women were eyeing him up as marriage material, but he decided to not get remarried. Anyways, I grew up in a small neighborhood where gossip flew around from constantly, and occasionally I would hear things about me. There were lots of talk going on about me and how I was a bad omen to my father. Okay, it's true that my mother died while giving birth to me, but then how was that supposed to be my fault? I told Dad, but he asked me to not pay any attention to them. At first I tried, but after my dad lost his job, I began to think that maybe the rumors were true. But what if they are right? I don't know, but I'm very sorry. I'm beginning to feel like they are right.
Ha! What did I tell you about them? Don't pay attention to them, sweetheart. People will always talk. All you have to do is live your life.
It was difficult, as you can bet, but I managed to pull through until I was able to leave the neighborhood for college. That was where I met Knight. At first, I was attracted to him because of his name. I found it both weird and fascinating that anyone would have Knight as a first name. We became study partners and grew to become lovers. Our love blossomed, and we tied the knot shortly after college. Life was going very smoothly for me, and soon after we were married, I became pregnant. 5 months into my pregnancy, I lost my father. It was a big blow for me considering how much I loved him, and it had very terrible consequences on me. I suffered a miscarriage. That was where it all started. You see, my mother-in-law lived in the same city as us, and we lived only about a 15-minute drive away from each other, so she visited us frequently. We weren't the closest of relatives, but she wasn't a problem at least. However, with the miscarriage, she became a thorn in my side.
I should have known it. If only I had asked my son not to marry a murderer, I would be a grandmother by now.
At first, she never said those things directly to me, so I didn't really make anything out of them, though I must confess, I felt hurt, especially the part where she called me a murderer. I mean, how could she even think that I'd kill my own baby? Anyways, I ignored her for the most part of it until she confronted me one day.
So I did a little digging and found some secrets about your family. Your mother suffered a miscarriage twice before having you, right? Then when she finally did, you killed her, so you're an evil omen, huh? Why did you let my son fall in love with you?
I couldn't believe my ears. I don't know what was worse, her reminding me of the one childhood memory I wished I'd forgotten or her actually crying. Well, maybe it was only an act after all. I was too dumbfounded to speak and only turned away and ran to my room. I refused to tell my husband about it. I wished I had because one day at dinner, he told me some really bad news.
Mom and I have decided that it would be nice if she moves in with us. You know, she's getting old and I don't feel too comfortable about letting her stay on her own.
I pretended to be okay with the plan, but protested mildly when he told me she was moving in the next day. He asked if I had problems with having his mother around, but I lied and told him everything was going to be fine, and I'd love to have her around. Life was hard with her around, but I managed to pull through. I had a reason to be happy again when only about 3 months after her moving in, I became pregnant again. I wanted to keep the news to myself for a while, but I couldn't keep a secret from Knight, and so I broke the news to them. My mother-in-law seemed truly happy and completely fooled me into letting my guard down. Before then, I was always cautious around her. She did lots of nice things for me and even offered to help out in the kitchen. In my second trimester, I suffered lots of dizziness and so was forced to resign from my job and also from the kitchen. My mother-in-law did a great job in babysitting me and taking care of our meals, but little did I know that she still had an agenda against me. Pregnancy made me develop an allergy for peanut butter, and she knew it very much. One day, however, she made a two-step plan against me. First, she made the floor wet and called me to come meet her. I innocently heeded her call but slipped and fell hard. In an act of feigned sympathy, she helped me up and offered me something to eat.
I'm sorry, dear. Here, have this.
I'd barely tasted the food she offered me when I realized it was peanut butter. I passed out immediately. I don't know how long I remained unconscious, but I woke up in a hospital bed. I opened my eyes to find my husband with red, swollen eyes. I knew how hard it was for him and asked him what was said about me. He told me I was fine now that I'd regained consciousness, but I felt a bit lighter than usual and looked down to see I'd lost my baby. I cried terribly and told my husband what had happened. I was discharged from the hospital, and as soon as we got home, he snapped at his mother and threatened to sue her for endangering my life. But she swore that she was unaware I had an allergy for peanut butter. She pleaded us for mercy, and I was foolish enough to accept her apology. My husband wanted her out, but I interceded on her behalf, and she gained an extended stay. The doctor asked me to stay home for a few months and recover. I told him I was fine, but he insisted, and so I was left without a choice. At first, I hated staying at home and doing nothing, but it paid off in the long run. One afternoon, while moving around the house, I heard my mother-in-law make a phone call. I was never one to eavesdrop on people's conversations, but I couldn't help it. I don't know who it was she was talking to on the other end about how her plans had worked and how she intended to turn her son's heart against me. I quickly recorded everything, her own part of the conversation at least. Later in the day, I snuck into her room and found her phone, and checked to see who she had been talking with, and I wrote down their name and phone number and made plans to try to uncover who they were. I waited until dinner time and confronted her. As expected, she denied everything outright and even threatened me, but had no words when I shocked her by playing the recording. She begged us for forgiveness and promised to turn a new leaf. Well, after I'd let my guard down to give her access to my kitchen, and again forgive her after forcing me to have a second miscarriage, do you think I was going to be third-time foolish? I know what you're thinking, and you're right. At least if your guess was no, I had run out of patience and wasn't going to just sit around and watch her ruin us again. But then, I wanted to make sure she suffered. My husband was shocked when I interceded on her behalf again and profusely begged him to give her one more chance. If only she'd known what I had in mind against her, I'm sure she would have left.
I'm very sorry for everything. I feel ashamed. I wish I could turn back the hands of time. I swear I would be the best mother-in-law you could ever have.
It's okay. You are my mother as much as you are his mother. I understand people make mistakes, but I believe we shouldn't judge anyone because of their little misdeeds. I hold no grudge against you. I love you all the same. My husband watched the whole drama with a big expression of shock on his face. He had no idea how I had such a big heart to forgive his mother after everything she did to me. But then he was wrong. I didn't forgive her, and I was sure I never would. She was evil, but while I didn't show it, I had dined and wined on the devil's table too. I swung into action the next day. First, I managed to get a hold of all her financial records, both personal and business. It wasn't very difficult since she kept all her paperwork out in the open on the desk in her room. She was basically retired, but she had people managing her business affairs and accounts for her. I discovered they were evading tax and were also approaching bankruptcy, but had somehow managed to cover things up. I tasked myself with learning how to forge her signature until I could do it no differently from her even with my eyes closed. I was a tech geek, so I managed to hack into their system and registered myself as a business associate under a false alias that could never be traced to me. I discussed a business project with the person she had put in charge as her manager, and promised to reward her handsomely if she could compromise and divert funds to a secret account I gave to her. Luckily, she was extremely greedy, deceptive, but also wasn't smart enough to run a check on things and did just as I'd asked her, even going as far as getting huge loans in the company's name. After 5 months of our shady dealings, I intentionally leaked one of the transactions and allowed her to be caught. It turned out that I'd convinced her into opening a new account in her own name, where I diverted some funds. The company went bankrupt, and with numerous lawsuits against them on allegations of different classes of fraud. My mother-in-law was sentenced to jail for evading tax and misleading investors, while her manager received a heavier sentence. If you're wondering why I dragged her manager into things, she was the one my mother-in-law spoke with on the phone. I had discovered that her name and number matched those of the person that my mother-in-law had been speaking with after she had managed to cause me to miscarry. I realized they were plotting to have me killed so that the manager could marry my husband. I had gotten revenge on both of them as their schemes came to light, and my husband now knew how dangerous his mother truly was. So not only was I able to make my husband see his mother for the evil woman that she truly is, but I also managed to bankrupt the woman as well, as I had convinced the manager to take out high-risk loans which caused all the various companies my mother-in-law owed to go bankrupt. Fast forward to today, I'm blessed with a son and have my enemies in only their second year in jail. I convinced my husband to disassociate himself from his mother, so whatever way, it's a win-win for me. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe for more stories.